A new fire chief is on the way for Jacksonville Fire Rescue. The city council president who served 32 years at JFRD will join us. We're asking Randy White about his relationship with Mayor Deegan as he turns over the leadership to another council member. Florida begins a new budget cycle this coming week. The just passed budget gave Governor DeSantis a short amount of time to use his line item veto. Government law attorney Chris Hand joins us, and we'll talk through the implications for Northeast Florida on This Week in Jacksonville. Thanks so much for joining us today. Jacksonville City Council met Tuesday. It's the last meeting with District 12 Councilman Randy White leading as president. President White joining us today, and I appreciate your time with us. I know a year ago we talked about, hey, in this one-year term I have as president, here are some of the things we want to accomplish. Thought it was appropriate now just to talk about, hey, what were some of the wins in this year as leader?
Probably the biggest win, in my opinion, and it took more than me, it took the whole council as a whole, but I was concerned with our public safety sector, or JFRD and JSO. We was falling behind in retention and recruitment because they had lost they had lost the defined benefit program several years back. So we matched the salaries of the other major large fire departments in the community. In fact, JSO and JFRD got the largest raises in history of JFRD and JSO. And then in 27, they'll be able to join the FRS if they choose to do so. They just
not demanded that they do, but now they've got the option.
They've got the option.
You know,
right now they just got the 401k, the people that's been hired the last 7 years. But in 27, they'll have the option to keep that program or join the Florida retirement system, which is a defined benefit plan. And all the other counties in the state of Florida, most of them are on the FRS. So that has already increased the retention and recruitment for JFRD and JSO.
I do recall, a year ago, you're saying, hey, public safety, really important to me, obviously with your background, your experience going through some of that. It seemed like there was a pretty good relationship this last year between the council president and the mayor. Mayor Deegan went out of her way this week to mention that she thought, even when you disagreed, you were a statesman, I think she said.
Well, you know, I'm one that there's not a whole lot of drama in me, and I told her early on that if I had an issue, we would talk direct. I wouldn't play it out in the media. One thing we do have in common, I love this city, and she does too. So I wasn't going to take a negative path to slow this city down by being nothing other than trying to be a statesman. Like I say, we always did not agree, but we would talk about it, and the things we didn't agree on, we respectively disagreed with each other and moved on. So I appreciate the relationship, and I hope that continues with the remaining years on.
Well, and I would ask, is that important to you? Should that be the perspective or the path for every elected leader, to try and work that way with somebody, even if they disagree with it?
I wouldn't guide what the next leader does, but it certainly, I think, is best for this city to be able to do that. And it's okay to disagree. Some of us, 19 on the council, as I think Carrico said last week, there's 19 personalities and they have different thoughts, but at the end of the day, usually you get it right, usually, you know, but respect goes across, it should be in every step of your life, in my opinion, and that's what I try to do, and I think they will be. I think there'll be respect with the next council president and the mayor. Yeah. And they don't, like I say, they don't always have to agree, but we need to move the city forward.
So recent immigration legislation passed in council, and the mayor this week vetoed it. It goes back to council, and there weren't enough votes to override the veto. What's your view on that? And will we see more of this same kind of bill?
I don't know. There's, like I say, 18 other council persons. They could be other bills, but you know, that's a subject that it was hashed out. She vetoed it. We did not have the votes to overturn the veto, so I'm going to move on that subject. And if someone else brings it up, we'll see where it goes.
Yeah. Some of the accusations flying there, not from you, but the council member who initiated the bill says that the mayor vetoing it makes Jacksonville a sanctuary city. The mayor says that's not even possible. Is that phrase applicable to Jacksonville, sanctuary city?
Well, I don't know if it's a true statement or not, but I'll say this with our sheriff, TK Waters, I am not worried about this city becoming personally a sanctuary city with the sheriff that we have in place with TK Waters.
All right. So let's talk about the budget. Is there a budget crisis in the future for the city of Jacksonville? The projections from the council auditor and what have you, hey, we're going to have a deficit in the future.
The last numbers I got, and this come from the council auditor, what they're looking at right now, they think there'll be approximately $100 million deficit for the next 3 years. The increase in the garbage collection fee, that'll generate around $45 million, which will help cut that deficit some. And as you know, and the mayor will present her budget mid-July, and then the finance committee will go to work on it. And then we'll have to decide the places we have to cut. But if that number is correct, there'll be some hard decisions to make by the finance committee, and but we will get through it, and we'll continue to move the city forward.
Mayor Deegan has talked about that upcoming kind of crisis as well. Is that an area where council and the mayor's office disagrees? It sounds like you both are approaching this from, we're going to have to make some tough decisions.
No, I think everybody knows if there's a $100 million deficit, we know there's going to be some tough decisions. Now, what those decisions, of course, on most people's top of their list, I mean, public safety and infrastructure, you know, that's very important to the city for the safety of the city. So, you know, we cannot really cut funding, in my opinion, in those areas, but we'll just have to see what the true number is after everything comes out of the property appraiser's office of where we really are. But that's just an estimate from the council to auditor. It could be a little more, it could be a little less.
You got to have some place to start on that planning. Hey, before we run out of time, I want to spend at least a minute or two. Your view, Chief Keith Powers is leaving as the leader of JFRD. Your view on what he's accomplished in his time leading, and whoever the next chief is going to be.
Well, like I said, I've been around a long time. I've been retired 13 years and was there 32. So for the last 50 years, I've had an eye on the fire department. I've had some great leaders. And I would say Keith Powers ranks up as high as any of the leaders we've ever had. Now, he had the fortune of better times and budgets and getting the funding he needed to do what we needed to protect the citizens. So that made that part a little easier. And he now has a rescue unit in every fire station. I think there's 65 fire stations in the city of Jacksonville. Just opened one up 2 days ago. That's right. Got another one coming out on 301 in a couple of years. And on the ISO rating, which is how you pay your insurance, we're the largest Class 1 fire department, not in the country, but the world. And that's a big statement.
Say that again, right?
We're the largest Class 1 fire department in the world. And that's what affects your insurance rates. And that alone has saved between $300 and $400 million a year to the homeowners in their insurance policies.
Wow. Well, and I'll mention that Chief Powers, as soon as we heard that he was retiring, that his last day would be Monday, the 30th of June, me and several of my colleagues have reached out, hey, would you do an interview? And the response is, he wants to make sure that the focus is on the firefighters, not him. He's a guy who is not looking for the spotlight, but in your opinion, sounds like he's done what he's needed to.
No, he has, and he's another one of them guys that it's a lot of people said, I did this, I did that. I'm not an I guy, I'm a we guy, and he is that same person. He knows it takes a group to make things work, and he's done a great job, and he's going to be missed. He's going to be hard to replace.
Council President Randy White, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
All right. Well, stay with us. So the local budget conversation begins in Jacksonville in July. The new state budget goes into effect this week. Chris Hand is going to join me next. We're going to talk about it on This Week in Jacksonville.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville with Kent Justice.
And with Chris Hand, we do a Hand on Government segment once a month, and we talk through issues state, local, federal. Today, we're going to focus really on the state of Florida. The Florida state budget goes into effect Tuesday. Typically, this kind of would have been put to bed a month and a half ago. That was not the case this time. Let's talk about, I guess, where we land on winners and losers in the state budget. And obviously, because it went so late, Governor DeSantis, he has line item veto power, but didn't have much time to really exercise that.
Well, Kent, it has been a long and winding road, a wild ride in the 2026 Florida legislative session, and now it's finally come to a conclusion about 6 weeks after the session was supposed to end. You know, and odd-numbered years like this one, the session begins the first week in March, and this year was supposed to end on May the 2nd. It ended on June the 16th when the budget was finally passed. What legislators ultimately came out with was a budget that's $115 billion. It's about $3.5 billion less than last year's budget, and also about $500 million less than the budget the governor proposed. And what's interesting, Ken, is for all the talk in this year's budget about tax relief, the governor wanting property tax relief, the Speaker of the House wanting sales tax relief, some of the big ideas that each of those different stakeholders talked about have really been deferred until next legislative session. What the legislature ended up doing was passing about $1.3 billion in tax relief, most of that in the form of the elimination of the sales tax on commercial leases. So if you rent a commercial space, you've been paying a 2% state sales tax and maybe some local option sales tax on that lease. That's now gone. So from a tax relief standpoint, which is really the reason the budget got delayed, they ended up doing some more modest tax relief and deferring other issues for 2026.
There certainly are some things that are in the budget as we sit here today that look like they'll impact Northeast Florida.
Well, lots of things in the budget, you know, both overall, there's large amounts of money. Remember, Ken, about 92% of kind of what's called general revenue in the budget goes to education, health and human services, and corrections. And a lot of that state operational funding lands here in Northeast Florida, but there are particular Northeast Florida projects as well. For example, there's about $15 million in the budget to build a new academic building for the Hicks Honors College at the University of North Florida. They just built an honors dorm. This would be an academic building that would go along with that, about $15 million. About $4 million going to Jacksonville University to help increase and expand its Bachelor in Nursing program, which is something that's been a big priority for JU in recent years.
And both of those universities have well-respected nursing programs, JU and UNF, and to see them leaning into and saying we want to be even better here is...
Well, that's right. And as we know, in recent years, there's been sort of a nursing shortage in the state of Florida. So again, why I think that's become even more of a priority. But there's other spending in the budget as well. There's about $6 million for part investment in a new road on the south side of Jacksonville that would connect Duval County and St. Johns County, money for an overpass in Talleyrand, about $3.5 million for the Greater Jacksonville Fair, which we know is moving from the stadium area out to the west side, and about $2.5 million to help move MOSH, the Museum of Science and History, from the south bank of downtown to the north bank of downtown. So a variety of projects like that championed by members of the Senate, by members of the House. But before we can say they're finally in the budget, we know what's coming next, which is now the legislature has transmitted the budget to the governor. He has a chance to review and issue his line item veto authority. He's already said publicly just in the last week that he plans to issue at least $500 million in vetoes. I think chances are he's going to get a lot closer to that number he was at last year, which was nearly $1 billion in budget vetoes. And we'll see what happens, but some of those vetoes could impact projects right here in Northeast Florida.
Well, and it's an interesting process because, as you just described, the budgets the governor proposed was here, and the House and Senate even reduced that. And now with the line item veto, he's going to tear it down just a little bit more, $500 million or what have you.
The place we seem to be, Ken, is there's an old line from the musical Annie, Get Your Gun. Anything you can do, I can do better. And I think the governor and the State House Speaker have been going back and forth in that regard. He cut the governor's budget. Now I think the governor's likely to respond, probably by more than $500 million to cut that budget. But we'll have to track and see where some of those cuts fall. Another huge project that has a lot of proponents and opponents here in the state of Florida, there's about $6.25 million in the state budget to dismantle part of what's called the Rodman Dam and restore the flow of the Ocklawaha River in Putnam County. That's a project here in Northeast Florida that for years has attracted a lot of debate. We'll see what the governor does there. But again, this governor has wielded a fairly heavy veto pen over time. The state budget takes effect on Tuesday, just 2 days from now, on July the 1st. So he really has until then to make his final decisions. The legislature, of course, would have an opportunity to come back and try and override any vetoes. They did that with several earlier this year. But at the moment, the ball is in the governor's court.
I want to take a little bit more time here in this segment just to talk about the Rodman Dam project there. So that's Putnam County. What's the impact of what they're trying to do there?
Kent, this has been a debate that's been going on for 55 years now. I mean, the brief history is back in the late 1960s, the federal government started to build what was called the Cross Florida Barge Canal. Frankly, you can still see it today if you drive over State Road 19 in Putnam County. The idea was to connect the east coast and west coast of Florida for barge traffic. Well, as part of that effort, they had to build a series of locks and dams to kind of help regulate the flow of the water. And one of those dams was what is colloquially, kind of commonly known as the Rodman Dam, officially the Kirkpatrick Dam. But it stopped the flow of the Ocklawaha River. For years, there have been concerns about that in terms of the impact on water quality. It submerged a number of springs. People were concerned about the economic impacts it might have had. On the other side, in the aftermath of the Rodman Dam, the bass fishing and other recreational sport industries, the Rodman Dam became a very popular place for that. So you see a very interesting coalition, both proponents and opponents of this potential change. On people who favor the appropriation, favor undamming Rodman, include environmentalists, include people like State Senator Jason Brodeur, a Republican from Central Florida, who said that it would have both economic and environmental benefits, and others in the economic and environmental space who say this would create even more recreational fishing opportunities if it came down. On the other side, you have people like State Senator Tom Leek, who represents the area, the Putnam County Commission, and others who are concerned that this would have a potentially negative economic impact because of the bass fishing industry and the recreational sports that occur as a result of it. So last year, the governor vetoed a small $500,000 appropriation to study the kind of taking down the Rodman Dam. This year, there's actual money to start doing the job. We'll know soon enough whether the governor's decided to use his veto or not.
And so let's just wrap that up. How late in the process does the governor have to veto something, because the new budget starts on July 1st?
Well, effectively, the way the budget is written, Ken, it says it takes effect either on July 1st or when the governor acts on it, whichever is later. And if it happens to be later, the budget is just retroactive to July 1st at that point. For all practical purposes, the governor is going to act before July 1st. He said that he's going to act. So I think it's likely that if he hasn't already taken action, he will be taking action very soon, right up until the deadline. The new fiscal year starts on Tuesday.
We will be watching for that. And stay with us. So here's a collision of state and federal policy that we're going to talk about. Governor DeSantis says Florida could turn Camp Blanding in Clay County into an immigration detention facility. We'll look at that next on This Week in Jacksonville.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville on Channel 4.
Government law attorney Chris Hand with us. Chris, let's talk about this. It's kind of, as I was mentioning a moment ago, the collision of Florida policy and federal policy. Governor DeSantis says he's got an idea to make Camp Blanding an immigration detention facility. He called it similar to Alligator Alcatraz.
Well, Ken, as you know, the state of Florida in the last couple of years has passed some new legislation dealing with immigration enforcement and detention. As a result, they've now set up, or in the process of setting up, the first of a series of immigration detention facilities on the site of the former Everglades jetport. This was going to be a huge airport. They started building the Everglades in the late 60s, stopped it. It's been just sort of a series of runways since then. The state has now taken that over for about a 5,000 person immigration detention facility that, they say the federal government's going to reimburse the state for the $450 million a year cost of operating. They're looking for other facilities around the state, and one of the sites the governor proposed this week was Camp Blanding right here in Northeast Florida in Clay County.
I can understand. I've heard the reasoning, at least in the Everglades. Hey, detainees get out. There's nowhere to go except into the swamp. What's the thought process with Camp Blanding? Because there's available space there? What's the thought?
I think that's part of it. It's the Florida National Guard training headquarters here in the state, so obviously directly controlled by the state already. Large swath of territory which they might be able to use for that. Again, WJXT was actually out there in the aftermath, in Clay County, in the aftermath of this announcement, talking to people who live there, and there seems to be some mixed reaction from people living in Clay County. So that's going to be something important to track going forward. If you live in Clay County, or if you're in Middleburg or Penny Farms or Green Cove Springs or Keystone Heights, kind of gauging what public reaction was, because really the first time this became public is when the governor announced it just a few days ago.
Yeah.
So they haven't started work there yet because a lot of the focus has been on what they're calling, alligator Alcatraz. But again, the governor did float that aid, and it sounds like it's at least a possibility moving forward.
Is it something that the executive branch can just say, yep, that's going to happen, or would the legislature need to be involved in a decision like that?
Well, to the extent that the executive branch, ultimately has sort of operational control over the Florida National Guard, they can sort of use those resources. If there are expenditures of state funds that have not already been authorized, and again, there has been money in recent state budgets for immigration-related issues, then they might have to go back to the legislature. But this is also a situation where the state says it is looking for reimbursement from the federal government, specifically FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. The state says that FEMA has said that it will reimburse the South Florida site, Alligator Alcatraz, but no word yet on the potential other sites like Camp Blanding. So that's a financial issue we'll have to track over time and see where that goes.
Yeah, maybe final 30 seconds there, but the idea for those folks in Clay County, this seems to be a partisan issue, and most of the folks in Clay County vote red or Republican. I'm not sure the governor's going to make more fans by making a move like that in Camp Blanding.
Well, I just don't think we know. Like I said, when News4JAX went out there this week, there was really mixed reaction. There were some who said they were perfectly fine with it, others who said they had concerns. I think we're going to have to track that on the Clay County Commission and in some of those cities going forward to see what the long-term reaction to that idea will be.
Well, Chris Hand, always appreciate it, and always a good conversation. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Ken.
And appreciate your time. And next time, State Senator Jennifer Bradley plans to join us. We're talking about the impact of the new budget, along with whatever Governor DeSantis vetoes. I'm Kent Justice. Thanks for watching On Air on Channel 4 and the CW17. And remember, you can find us online, news4jax.com, or we're streaming on News4Jax Plus.
See why every day more people are choosing News4JAX, Northeast Florida and South Georgia's #1 source for local news.